Hello everybody, my name is Jared and today I have another watercolour portrait for you. Today's watercolour portrait is going to be based on my character from my comic I Am a Criminal. This character is called Aloy. She has not come into the comic as of the release of this video, but she will be coming into it a little bit later. She is a half orc and she lives in a shipping village. I won't go into her character too much, just obviously because it is a spoiler for my comic I'm a Criminal. If you want to read I'm a Criminal, it should be in the description below. It is on Webtoon. It is a LGBT focused fantasy comic about freedom and basically friendship, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. It's got a lot of chaos going on, really interesting characters, and hopefully pretty art, so yeah, please have a little look. The comic itself is in digital, but the series that I'm doing at the moment is a watercolour illustration of every single character. This character is the 6th watercolour that I've actually done, but I will be redoing a couple of them just purely because, one, the characters have changed, the character designs, particularly Baitor, his colour scheme has changed completely, and 2, I just want to update some of the art because one of them is actually 2 of them is almost 2 years old now. So I want to redo it and then release them all as prints, hopefully. Watercolour is actually one of my favourite mediums to work in. I like watercolour and gouache for my traditional work. I do actually use Copics as well, but I personally am not very good with Copics and I don't have a huge selection of them. So watercolour and gouache are kind of the ones that I go to the most. I like that with watercolour and gouache you can kind of work into them over and over and over and it doesn't sort of smear too much. Watercolour less so, but gouache particularly very good for like layering on top of itself. But watercolour again, as long as you start light, you can work quite a lot of layers into it, which I really enjoy. I don't like committing to colours too early on. So as you can see in this one, I started off with my usual technique. I started with a colour thumbnail. Once the colour thumbnail was kind of figured out, I sort of worked into it again with figuring out more colours, and then finally went into the sketching phase. Now, for thumbnailing this one, it actually took, I think, about 6 tries before I actually got one I liked. I wanted the focus to be on the area, but also her. I wanted her to stand out a little bit, but I did want her village that she grows up in to be a really big focus of the piece, because it's a really big part of her character. When I'm sketching, I usually will have figured out the pose and the layout in the thumbnail phase, so really it's just kind of translating that into an actual illustration, adding details and things like that. The village itself is based loosely on a place that my family is originally from, and also a place that we grew up a lot, which is Austria. If anyone's been to Europe, Austria is almost similar to Germany. It's very mountainous and a lot of the buildings are very traditional looking. You have a lot of this like wooden barring across the front of the buildings. Most people actually decorate their houses like with loads of flowers and stuff like that. It's a very traditional looking place, or at least the places that we were. We spent a particular amount of time in stuff like Meerhofen and things like that. So her village is based a little bit on that, but also it's a shipping port village, which obviously Austria is not. So again, it's got this combination of this beautiful shipping dock with these really traditional looking buildings, which I thought would be really interesting for that kind of village. As I said, the comic deals with a lot of themes of freedom and things like that. So a lot of the illustrations will either feature the character in what I would consider safe space, which is like a place that they feel comfortable and free in, or it will feature them with a sort of element of longing in their piece for the life that they want to experience. Once I finish the sketching phase, which does take a long time, I will say, I would say easily the sketching phase is the longest phase for me. It's just sort of a little bit of back and forth between, does this pose look good? Is the sizing of everything okay? How's the perspective looking? Is the background basically as minimal detail as possible, because the further background I did want it to be kind of far back so that you wouldn't be really focusing on it too much. So obviously stuff like the water and the sky and things like that, I just really wanted them to be sort of minimal detail and the front area to be really, really detailed, so that you'll focus more on the buildings and on Aloy herself. But yeah, as I said, once I finished that, I go straight into the line art. With the line art, I use Staedtlers in this one. I believe most of it was done in sizes 0.5 downwards all the way up till 0.05. I really only used that one for like really fine details. The rest of them were all around the like 3:1 sort of ratio. Once those were finished, I went straight into getting that line art really crisp. How I use my line art is actually I will use the heavier one on the areas where the light is hitting it the least, and on the further out areas of the illustration, so around the edge of Aloy, the art will be a little bit thicker than the inside of her illustration. I hope that makes sense. So outer line, a little bit thicker, line on that which is actually being hit by the light the least will be even thicker. So she is a little bit backlit in this one, so the lighting is going to be coming from behind her, meaning the line that's on the outer layer that is not being hit by light will be obviously the heaviest. And then on the inside we use those really thin lines for stuff like the nose details, the eye details, things like that. Once all of my line art is complete, I will then start working on the actual watercolour painting. Here I set down some basic colour areas. I will get the gradient in for that background sky, because obviously the sky is going to be a really difficult part. It needs to be like a soft gradient because it is meant to look kind of like a sunset image. And then the water is going to come into that as well. We're going to basically work in those sort of like base layers, and then I work in the shades, and I'll also sort of at that point start working in details. I always sort of work from lighter colours forward to dark colours, but there are some times where I sort of like dart in between, but mostly I will work from light to dark, whereas in gouache I would usually work from dark to light. It's just easier with watercolour to start really light, because then you can just keep adding colour if you want something to be more pigmented, or if you want something to be a little bit darker and moodier. I will say the darker and brighter the colours are, the more focus they'll have in the image for a watercolour piece, so I would be really careful about how much pigment you add to backgrounds. I did struggle with that a little bit in this. I feel like particularly the sky itself stands out a little bit too much, and I would have liked it a bit sort of waterier, sort of softer. I always try and make my character designs have a little bit brighter colours than the backgrounds, just purely so that they'll stand out more. You'll find that in all of the characters for I'm a Criminal, their colour schemes are a little bit brighter, so they stand out a little bit more from the backgrounds. As of now, I have to do a couple of redos of watercolour pieces and finish one more, and that will be the entirety of the watercolour sets done, so I'm very excited to get to that point. So that is the flat layers for Aloy. Once we've got the details in, I will then finish up, just touch up everything, make sure that everything's looking nice and crisp, and then I will wait for that to dry completely, and I'll go in with a little tiny bit of pencil crayon. I don't really think it matters what kind of pencil crayons you use. I have ones that you can buy from WH Smith's in the UK. I think those work fine. I would like to try a slightly more expensive brand. Maybe I would try, everyone says Prismacolors are really nice, so I might try those one day. But currently this is what I work with, and it works fine. I use this for working a little bit of blush or shading and rendering into the face. Just because the face is really small, it's quite hard to achieve that with watercolour for me. And just darkening some of the edges and crisping things out. Just those areas that are really difficult to get to a paintbrush. In I go with the pencils. And then once it's finished, all I have to do is I have to sign at the bottom. I sign all of my pieces with my actual name instead of my sort of art handle. And yeah, there we are. That is going to be my watercolour portrait of Aloy from the comic I Am a Criminal. As I said, you can read I Am a Criminal in the description below. It's on Webtoon. Please do support it and have a little look. I hope you guys will enjoy it. It's one of my favourite projects I've ever done. I'm really proud of it, and all of the characters are really interesting. It's LGBT, and there'll be lots of romance and drama and combat and hopefully cute characters that you might be interested in. If you'd like to ask me anything more about my process, things I didn't go into detail about, I am always available to answer comments. I try and get to every comment that I get on my YouTube channel, and if you do want to have any work commissioned, I will also be available for taking art commissions. I know, I'm currently taking art commissions on my Instagram, so please do message me on Instagram. You can also message me on TikTok or on YouTube, but it's probably easier to contact me on Instagram. My Instagram is always in the description below, and yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you guys are having a lovely day, and as always, please remember to be creepy.